don't bring personal issues into the stories, right? So now this is really, 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 really important. We have covered this in other videos as well. What I mean by that is when you choose your examples, always choose examples that are clean, that are about you solving a problem, about, think of it as a business-minded person, a professional person, and use examples that are about solving something, right? So, in other words, it shouldn't be about personal conflict and, just kind of not getting along with colleagues or bosses or anything like that. Does that make sense? Because I know there's, confusion around that. And typically, naturally, when we think about when somebody asks us, well, so tell me about a conflict with a coworker. Of course. If we were, if that was a friend asking you, or 80% of what's going through your head is stuff that's what I would call, it's just personality clashes, all, competition, resentments, all that kind of thing, right? But that's what you need to avoid. Absolutely avoid that. And instead, pick the conflict over a work thing, right? So in other words, the conflict you had with your colleague is that you wanted to go this way with your, say, marketing strategy, right? And she wanted to go that way. But you keep it not about your personalities, but about, you wanted to do this because based on XYZ fact, you felt that this was the better way to go. And your colleague felt that given her experience in previous whatever, this was the way to go, right? So how do you handle that? I mean, you respect your colleague, but at the same time, you really, really, really feel like very strongly about this. So how do you solve that kind of conflict, right? So you see what I mean? It's a work-related conflict. It's business. You guys are at work, you're trying to figure something out, and there's a strong difference of opinion as to how you should proceed. Make sure that the examples you're using doesn't have to do with personality conflicts, right? That it's about business and a divergence of opinion on how to handle something, the solution to something. And so your narrative really should be about, this is what your data shows, but this is what the other person wants to show, right? And we explain in our videos how, how you handle a conflict with a coworker is very different to how you handle a conflict with your boss. And all of that's different to how you handle a conflict with an external client. There are different nuances that come into the picture. And so these are the things that the interviewer is looking out for. Okay? And so let me give you an example of what I think is a kind of pitfall that easily one could fall into with these questions. And in fact, I actually got it from another website, another career advice website, and they used this as an example, right? And to me, it's excellent example of like what not to do, right? The kind of story you should not choose. And so in this example, the young lady is, sort of struggling with a particular coworker who she feels like she doesn't like her, and there's some issues with comments. It's affecting work, issues with projects they're working on, and then comments that she's making to other colleagues, and how, so in this story, the protagonist, she's upset, and she's naturally, she's concerned, and she doesn't understand what is going on. And so eventually she decides to confront, in a nice, she says how she went, she asked for a meeting, and she sat down with this person, and she asked about, what it is that was potentially not working, how could she improve the situation. And, as it turned out, she found out that in fact wasn't necessarily what she thought. There was an explanation, but at the same time, the other person too got a lot out of the fact that they spoke. So this is all good. So what she was trying to say is, how important, whenever there's a conflict, how important face-to-face communication is, and how important it is to kind of be brave and step up, even if it's awkward, and, kind of be the first person to try and sort it out. And it's so good that, they did do that. And in the end, it worked out very well. And this just tension kind of went away and everyone was able to do a better job. Now, all of that is very, 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 very good, right? There's no problem with the skill set that she's using and the way she set about trying to do that. The issue is that there is way too much of personal conflict going on, right? So, I didn't tell you the whole story, but there's a lot of detail about how, this happened and that happened, and then she, there's this, then she went and said this, and then she found out through her other colleague this other thing, and it's just this it's kind of this big hodgepodge of personal politics and clashes at work, right? And this is exactly what you want to steer clear of, right? You do not want to ever come across as the kind of person who gets involved in these kinds of situations. Now, it could not be your fault at all. It wasn't her fault. But the point is, it's not, still though, right? Like, it's not, it could come across that she was sensitive or she's not able to focus. Like, what I got out of that is, you still have to be able to focus on work, right? You got to get your work done. You can't be someone who gets distracted into these things, and it becomes very important to you to solve that problem as opposed to solve the many problems you need to be solving with your job, right? So do you see the difference? It's not that she didn't handle that very well. It's simply that, let's say it was a startup and it was my company, I'm the boss. I don't necessarily want that stuff going on, right? I don't want it to be, she handled the conflict well, but I don't want a conflict to begin with, right? It's just like, this is not a priority. And you kind of want people who don't get caught up in these things and who don't necessarily look to solve them either, and who just kind of mind their own business and get their work done, right? Now, if there's a serious problem, then of course you go to your boss and all of that. But again, this is not the kind of stuff you talking about in an interview. So remember, right? People forget that nothing I'm saying here is saying to you that when you are at work and you're faced with a tough situation, this is how you should behave. I'm talking about what you say in an interview, right? So in an interview, don't talk about those kinds of things, right? Because they're kind of trying to screen out candidates they think might be difficult to work with, candidates that are, just a little bit too inflexible. They want to see people who can pivot easily, who are flexible, who can roll with it, who more than anything keeps their nose to the ground, gets the job done, and doesn't get distracted with these personal things that come up all the time in work situations, right? So it's very important. Again, in what you say in an interview is very different to what might be, once you're involved in that kind of situation at work, that's different. And I'm not giving you advice about that. I'm giving you advice about, you are at an interview with a future employer and you're trying to get this job. So it's in your interest to keep things very simple, clean, professional, and speak about work problems that you solved. Every question is an awesome opportunity to show how you solved a work problem, right? You solved a resource issue. You solved a communication issue, sure, but over work, right? Over the fact that this analysis said this and the other analysis said that, and what are you going to do? You don't have time. That kind of thing, right? That's what really shows that you're a professional who's very, very, very focused on work and those kinds of discrepancies, but someone who's very neutral, almost kind of like the backdrop of what's going on, is not really something that affects you.